welcome back to my channel. It's not as hot as it's been, but it's still pretty hot here in Nevada, and I have lots of projects that I need to be doing around the house, but just not feeling up to it. I thought about going to the pool today, but honestly, I really didn't even want to make the effort to do that. So what I decided to do was to delve back into my vintage and antique cookbook collection, and I'm going to make an icebox cake, and it comes from the Boston Cooking School Cookbook that was first published by Fannie Merritt Farmer. You might know the most recent version of the cookbook, the Fannie Farmer Cookbook, which was published back in 1990. I have a copy of that. I got one of those when I was first married. This version was published in not 1836, but 1936. The original cookbook was actually published in 1896, and it's gone through many different versions. As I said, this is the 1936 version. A number of changes were made to conform with modern fashions in food. For example, cocktail parties are so much the vogue that the chapter on canapes and hors d'oeuvres has been considerably lengthened. Recipes for many choice foreign and regional specialties have been gathered since the last revision and are now included. Wine as an ingredient is so much more widely used than heretofore that room was made for many fine old recipes requiring its use. We're going to make an icebox cake. The original recipe is actually called orange icebox cake, but I think I prefer lemon. So I'm going to substitute the lemon filling for the orange. It's super easy to do. Let me show you how it's done. The first step in making our icebox cake is to make the lemon filling. So the recipe calls for a cup of sugar, 2.5 tablespoons of flour, the grated rind of 2 lemons, a 1/4 cup of lemon juice, 1 egg slightly beaten, and a teaspoon of butter. I have my ingredients pre-measured. So we've got the cup of sugar. The instructions tell us to mix the sugar and flour, then add the lemon rind and juice and the egg. So that's what we're going to do. Here's our cup of sugar, our flour, the grated rind of 2 lemons. So I've got my freshly washed lemon here. You want to make sure you don't get too far down into the lemon rind, because that's where it becomes bitter. So you just want that top layer. Icebox cakes became very popular in the 1920s and 30s as housewives had the option to keep things cooler longer in their newfangled ice boxes. Of course, that was that stand-up cooler that kept things fresh with a daily addition of an ice block. And of course, as electric refrigerators came along, the icebox cakes continued in their popularity. It's a really great way to use up leftover cake, leftover cookies, well, maybe not cookies, leftover cake, leftover biscuits. Not that there's ever much of that lying around my house. And of course, if you're using leftover cake, then you're really not standing in a hot kitchen baking. You're just going to be spending a few minutes over the stove to create your filling. There's our grated lemon rind. And now I'm going to slice my lemons. and juice them. Icebox cakes are still somewhat popular today, although I don't think you probably know them as icebox cakes. One of the more popular things, I think, in more recent times is the recipe called Death by Chocolate. That was really, really big back in the 90s. It consists of layers of chocolate cake that you break into chunks, chocolate pudding, Cool Whip, and also crumbled up toffee candy bars, and layered and chilled in the fridge. Brought that to many a party back in the 90s. I'm almost done with my lemon juice here, freshly squeezed. And I think I'm going to strain those lemon seeds out. I'm dealing with not very much counter space here, so to be economical in my movements. So there we go. That is just about a quarter of a cup. I'll be including, along with the recipe, I'll be including all of the metric measurements as well. So we've got our sugar and flour and lemon rind in the bowl, and now I'm going to be adding my lemon juice. And then it calls for 1 egg slightly beaten. You don't want to beat it to the point where you're ready to cook it in a pan and scramble it, but just a little bit. Good enough. Pour that in. Okay. I'm just going to give it a quick stir here. Make sure everything is incorporated. And now the next step is to cook it down. The next step is to take a teaspoon of butter, which I have pre-measured here, and melt it in your saucepan. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pour my lemon and sugar mixture into the pan. Put out as much as I possibly can so it doesn't get wasted. And cook it. I'm going to turn the heat up just a little bit here, but not too hot because I don't want it to burn. But you're supposed to cook it until it gets to the point where it's boiling. And according to the recipe, you're supposed to constantly stir so that the mixture does not stick to your pan. Now, I am using a non-stick saucepan, but I'm going to continue to stir it constantly nonetheless. turned my rotating fan off while I have the gas going, because that tends to blow the gas flame about. Rather be a little warm and safe than worry about possibly something catching on fire. Starting to simmer, starting to bubble along the edges, so we're almost there. It has a beautiful color that you're going to get from the zested rind of the lemon. It's just about at boiling point. And boiling point, of course, is when it bubbles constantly. Don't know if you can see that. So it's at a boil. I'm going to remove it from the heat and set it to cool. Once it's cool, I'll be able to put our cake together. Now that my lemon filling is completely cooled, I'm going to whip half a cup of heavy whipping cream. That's heavy whipping cream, not half and half, not milk, heavy whipping cream. I was going to use my hand mixer, but I can't seem to find it. So I dragged out my countertop mixer, which is great, no complaints, but I just thought it would be faster to use the hand mixer. So here we go. Using the whisk attachment, you're supposed to whip the cream until it's stiff. I'm going to go ahead and put it on high. This should only take a couple of minutes. It's just about there. Okay. Perfect. You don't want to do it too long or you'll end up with butter. Remove that. Try to get a little bit out of there. Oh, it's going to be hard. When I was done cooking the lemon filling, I transferred it back into this mixing bowl and I put it in the refrigerator to cool, otherwise it would have taken a lot longer. The next step is to fold the whipping cream into the lemon filling. Now by folding, it means to add it gently. You're literally folding it. You're not mixing it really hard as though you were scrambling an egg. You're just lifting the bottom of the filling over the whipped cream, and you do that until it's thoroughly combined. You don't want to lose the air that's been incorporated into the whipping cream when you beat it. Okay, that looks pretty good. I did taste it earlier, and it's just like lemon meringue. Okay. While I was waiting for the lemon filling to cool, I went ahead and lined my pan with wax paper. It says to use a mold, but using a pan here. It called for 9 by 13. However, I'm not sure I have quite enough materials to use to fill up a 9 by 13, so I went ahead and picked something smaller. Now the recipe calls for ladyfingers, and if you think you've never heard of ladyfingers, if you've eaten tiramisu, you've eaten ladyfingers. However, the problem was when I went to the store, I couldn't find any ladyfingers. However, there are a number of options that you can use if for some reason you aren't able to find ladyfingers either. Some of those options include biscotti, pound cake, biscuits. There are a few other things out there too. Those vanilla wafers, you could use those. I went ahead and chose pound cake as my substitute because it kind of put me in mind of using leftover cake to make an icebox cake, which is something that housewives would often do, use up leftovers. I didn't have leftover pound cake, but I did buy some, nice and fresh, and a nice buttery texture and a really nice dense crumb. The first step is to put a layer of pound cake at the bottom of the pan. I'm putting the larger slices in the middle, and then I'll edge it with some of the smaller pieces. It doesn't have to look perfect. Now I've got my first layer of pound cake. I'm going to put half of the lemon filling and whipped cream mixture over the pound cake, and I'm going to spread it about. You know, I don't remember my grandmother making icebox cake, but it's reminiscent of something that she probably would have done. My grandma loved doing things like strawberry shortcake. She liked lemon meringue pie. That was one of her favorites. Now that's my maternal grandmother. My paternal grandmother lived far away from me when I was younger, and so I only saw her a couple of times as I was growing up. When I got older, I actually moved back east, really close to where she lived, so I was able to visit her more frequently. And one of her favorite things to bake was something she called hucklebuckle cake, and I really wish that I had the recipe for that. I'm going to put a second layer of pound cake over the layer of lemon filling. Now, if you do go with ladyfingers, this recipe doesn't really specify how many you're going to need. So you might want to buy more than you think you need so that you don't feel like you have to run back to the store or skimp on the ladyfingers or pound cake or whatever it is that you're using as your cake layer. Go ahead and fill that in. That's the last of that. Just scrape that off. and top it off with a final layer of cake. Ooh. Okay, let's get these last pieces of pound cake on top here. Like I said, it's important to buy a little bit more than you think you're going to need. I actually ended up using 2 full pound cakes and a little bit extra from a third. Now I'm going to put it into the refrigerator. It needs to be refrigerated for at least 4 hours, preferably overnight, in order for everything to set. And what's nice about the filling is that it's actually going to be soaked into the pound cake as it refrigerates and cools, and all of the flavors will meld together. So we'll take a look at it together when it comes out later. As you can see, I've taken the Icebox cake out of the refrigerator. It's nice and cold. The filling has firmed up. I'm going to take a platter, put it on top. It's not going to quite fit the way it should, but this is the biggest platter that I have. Let's go ahead and flip that over, center it a little bit more, lift it off, and remove the wax paper. And there you have it. There's the Icebox cake in all of its glory. I know it doesn't look particularly fancy, but these are the sorts of things that you would be making for your family. So it may not look like company food, but I'm sure it's delicious. So I'm gonna cut myself a little bit here just to do a taste test. Okay, let's take a taste. It's good. It's sweet. You've got the butteriness of the pound cake that's combined with the sweetness of the lemon and heavy cream filling. Next time, I think, if I can't find ladyfingers, I will definitely slice the pound cake a little bit thinner, but otherwise it tastes delicious. Something that's cool and easy to make that I think your family will enjoy. And it's that simple, delicious, easy to make, and reminiscent of childhood favorites. Thanks again for joining me here at Pam's Speakeasy. If you like this video, please like it. Please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment. If you try this Icebox cake, let me know how it turns out. And I'll also put a link down below in the description along with the recipe for this, the strawberry pie that I made previously, which has gotten a really good response. So again, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Stay cool, everyone.